Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting of Monday, April 11th, 2022. First item on the agenda is to call item 1.1, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Is there any in the room this evening? Seeing none, I'll move on to item 2.1, the regular council meeting agenda for April 11th, 2022. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Beekman, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on to item 3.1, the regular council meeting minutes from March 28th, 2022. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the minutes as circulated? Councillor Pickering, any discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on to item 5.1, we have our MLA Grant Hunter here this evening. Grant, you want to come and take a seat at the table, please? Welcome. And you just have to turn your microphone on, and whenever you're ready to go, the floor is yours.
Well, it's good to be with you. I wanted to come and meet with all of the councils in my riding for after the last election in October, to be able to get to know the new councils and to hear your concerns, to answer some of the questions, and then to just kind of give a state of the union of what's going on in the province from a broad perspective. So that's why I'm here today, and I appreciate you inviting me here. So I just wanted to get the elephant out of the room that this was actually needed. I had an operation on my shoulder, and it was 15 years in the making, and so I'm well in the mend for the last 3.5 weeks. So it's good to be getting some of these things that I've been working on for the last 15 years for my health. So I wanted to just let you know that, as you know, we brought forward the budget. That is the first balanced budget that we've seen in 8 years. This is a good sign for, I believe, for our future generations, for our children and grandchildren, who always bear the brunt of an unbalanced budget and deficit spending. So I'm on Treasury Board, as some of you know, and so it's always good to be able to come to Albertans and say that on Treasury Board we actually did a good thing by being able to balance the budget. But as you know, the last 3 years have been difficult years. Last year, this time, was it last year or the year before? Time flies. We were paying other people to take our oil. We were in a real trouble in Alberta. There was a time where we actually were having a hard time selling Alberta bonds. That's where we were at. And so being able to get ourselves in a situation where we had to try to diversify our what we do in Alberta away from oil and gas, that will be always a big thing for us. And as you can see with the price of oil right now, we're benefiting from that. But we had to take a look at what we are going to do for a diversified Alberta. And the Premier came to Treasury Board and came to us and asked, well, each of you represent a different region. What is it that you have in your region that we could spend this counter-cyclical spending money that we were going to be, we had an envelope of counter-cyclical spending money. In your area, what can we do that can diversify and build our economy? And so I presented to them the concept and the idea of an agri-food processing corridor between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, including Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. We already do a lot of specialty crops in this corridor. We already have 70% of all of irrigation land right here. 70% of Canada's irrigation land is right here in southern Alberta. And so I pitched the idea of being able to create this agri-food processing corridor. This is something that I believe Coaldale will benefit from in the coming years and decades. As you know, there's a part that we announced a couple of years ago, which is the expansion of the Highway 3 twinning between Taber and Burdett, a $150 million project. Last year, we announced the expansion of the Chin Reservoir, which is a 60,000 irrigated acre expansion. When it's all said and done, there will be over 264,000 irrigated acre expansion, which will make us we're a big player already in Canada, but will make us even a bigger player in terms of the North American market for agri-food processing. All of these things are going to be done specifically to be able to create that agri-food processing corridor and make it into what you see, say, in Idaho. Idaho has probably the best example of these supermarkets where they'll create, if you think of Idaho, you think of potatoes. If you think of other places, you'll think of other commodities that they grow or produce. When they think of southern Alberta, you want them to think of specialty crops such as potatoes and such as sugar beets and that sort of thing. So we want to expand that. In order for us to do that, there's a few things that we still need to do. Number one, we need to create the corridor needs to have potable water from an industrial scale, a utility corridor from an industrial scale, and then it also needs to have, and we're working on this right now, is it needs to be a pre-approved agri-food processing corridor. In other words, what that means is that when businesses want to come in and build here, too often for the last couple of decades, they've said Canada, Alberta is just not open for business. It just takes too long to be able to get your money working for you. And so they're going to other jurisdictions, down in the States or other places. And so we actually beta tested a pre-approved industrial zone just east of Edmonton. And we're just finishing that up, and we're going to use that same model to be able to do something similar down here. So this is the stuff that we're working on, that I'm working on specifically to be able to help our area, and I think Coaldale will benefit from it. And that from an economic perspective, I think has been helpful. I think there's also, we've got the high school that we were able to get for Coaldale, a big project. That one is, it's one of the questions that you guys had, and I can go through. If you guys could ask the questions if you want. But that's going to be a big project. In terms of what's happening there, so the government of Alberta approved full funding for the replacement of the Kate Andrews High School in budget 2021. So it's not just design build funding, it's actually the full scale funding, which is kind of the step up, or the next step that you need to take. So that's good. That's a good sign. And obviously with the need for another school here, that was good to see. So the construction completion will be confirmed as the project progresses. Once complete, the replacement school will provide 855 student spaces for grades 7 through 12. And the construction is underway right now. So in terms of the details for that, I don't know what more details you're looking for that. I know that there were some questions about EMS, but I think that those were pulled off to talk about.
And Grant, what we'll do with that, we're going to be meeting on May 16th.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to have a good discussion about the ambulance, not only in the town of Coaldale or Lethbridge County, but the entire province. So we want to save those questions for that meeting on May 16th, if that works for you.
Sure.
And then we have some questions that we want to ask of you tonight, and if it's okay with you, we're just going to go around the council table and ask them, and then we'll see what you can do to
Sure.
answer them for us.
You bet.
That sound good?
You bet.
Okay. So I'll go with Councillor Beekman first, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for meeting with us tonight, Greg. The question I have pertains to education. In regards to the new education curriculum, we all know that was quite a hot button. I'm curious to know why.
Point of order. Sorry, Jason. Maybe try putting the mic closer.
Yeah. How's that work? Test 1, 2. Get that?
Tim, I can hear you.
Try that.
Patrick can hear him. Live stream, Patrick can hear him. I'll just switch mics with him.
Can you hear this one, Tim? Awesome. Technology is supposed to make life easier, isn't it? Sorry, back to my question there in regards to the curriculum, or the review for the curriculum. I'm just curious to know why the review panel, on the review panel, there was no current classroom teachers or nobody that had actually been in a classroom in the last 15 years. I feel that would be important when deciding education.
Well, look, this is a decision that was made by the Minister of Education. The curriculum development, as you are well aware, did not happen under the UCP. It happened under the NDP, and they started the process. The process was far more aggressive than what I think any government in the past has looked at. They wanted to go all subjects, all grades, which had never been done before. So we've kind of scaled back that process in order to be able to address K through 6. As you know, probably the most egregious parts that we heard was in the social studies curriculum, which they've pulled. That's going back to committee to be able to address those issues and try to be able to figure out what is going to be more age appropriate in terms of what they should be teaching. And I think that's again up to the minister to be able to do that. It goes to show that the minister was listening to the consultation that she went through. But in terms of having a teacher, a current teacher on the curriculum review board, I'm not exactly sure why that is going to be the critical factor in terms of being able to figure out if you get a good curriculum or not. I would say that the most important part of having a good curriculum is the expert curriculum developers, which are usually university professors, which they have a plethora of university professors counseling on that panel.
Go ahead.
On that, I understand completely. My wife being an educator, one of the big things that she's able to, or one of the things I've learned most about her is the challenges in today's classrooms with resources that aren't there, the same resources that we had back in the 80s and the 90s, that not every child learns the same as not every plant grows the same. And developing a curriculum, in my opinion, developing a curriculum around a diverse group of students, I personally just feel that people that are in the trenches day to day, I just feel it would have been more beneficial than university professors.
Well, when it comes to developing curriculum, there's multiple steps, multiple stages. And one of those stages is the actual testing or beta testing in the classrooms, which is happening. So when people say you're not going to get any current teachers, that is true. They're not on the curriculum advisory panel. But in terms of getting in the trench information, that is not true. They are getting good in the trench information as this is being beta tested in schools right now. And so you're going to get those teachers. And I used to be a teacher. I taught for 2 years. I started out as a teacher. I recognize the difficulty that you get being a teacher and having to deal with so many diverse needs of kids. But I can tell you that they are getting that information from the teachers, current teachers right now in the trenches.
Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. and thank you, Mr. Hunter, for coming out to see us. My question is, the Alberta government removed that 13.2 cents a liter gas tax, and to my knowledge, I mean, apparently they could not force the companies to take and lower their prices. Is that true? And why would that be? Because I know carbon tax raised it back up a couple cents a liter, but
Yeah.
it never seemed to show up at our pumps totally.
Of course. Every pump that I've gone to is at least 10 cents lower than
Really?
what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other
I
question
did look, by the way, because I heard that the NDP saying, you know, you got to force them. Well, it's actually not a conservative way to be able to force businesses to do that. That's more of an NDP socialist way. And I was not in favor of that, but the approach that they took was, I mean, maybe the NDP actually had a value there, because I think all of the businesses were like, oh my goodness, everybody's got their eye on us now. If we don't pass this on to consumers, then it's going to be our fault and we're going to look terrible. And I traveled all over the province, and everywhere I've gone, there's been at least a 10 cents drop. It would have been great if we'd had that 13.2% or 13.2 cent drop, but again, the carbon tax came in on April Fools, so
And
that
are-
was an extra 3 cents added to our cost.
And do you think they're ever going to cap like electricity prices to slow down utility rates from jumping? Because
Yeah, if you do that, all you do is you kick the problem down the road, and I don't think that's what Albertans don't want us to just kick the problem down the road. They want us to actually address the problem. Here's what happens. Whenever you do a cap, and look, I've been an MLA for 7 years, so I watched when the NDP did the cap. Anytime you do a cap, what happens is it distorts the market. So, as you know, in our system, we have a retail, we have a deregulated market. So you make a cap on that. Now, all it does is it drives out competition, which usually drives down the price, but it drives out that competition so that it actually decreases supply. Your demand is still the same, but it decreases the supply, which increases your equilibrium price. So why would we distort the market by a cap? Caps have never worked. All they do is they just pass the price on to another ratepayer, which is the taxpayer. So let's address the key issues, which is, number one, for the last 4 years that the NDP were in, they increased the transmission distribution costs of overbuild by $6 billion. Let's stop doing that. So we did that. The last 2.5 years that we've been in government, almost 3 years, we've built $100 million of transmission, which is where we should be doing it. We should not be overbuilding. We're way overbuilt in our utility. And I think that the other parts are, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think when they started the process of deregulating back in Ralph Times' day, there was 3 parts. There was retail, distribution, and transmission. And they only deregulated the retail side. The transmission and distribution are all regulated. That's the reason why Berkshire Hathaway is here, because they get an 8.5% guaranteed return on investment, no matter what they build. They're actually incentivized to overbuild, because if you're building 1 billion or 10 billion, an 8.5% on 10 billion is way better than an 8.5% on 1 billion. It's just simple math. So I personally believe, and I'm trying to convince the minister of this, is that we should get to deregulate our system completely so that you can have that competition come in. When we did that with the retail side, do you know that we had the lowest retail cost of electricity in North America with Texas? Texas and they were deregulated in that aspect as well. We had some of the lowest retail prices. As soon as the NDP got in, they went after the one thing that we were doing right, which was the retail side of that utility. And because of the rate cap, because they messed around with the power purchase agreements, which cost us $1.4 billion to fix that one because they didn't read a contract, they overbuilt by $6 billion, which we're paying for now, and they brought in a carbon tax. All of those things have driven up the cost of electricity. and more importantly than this, is they increased the speed of shutting down or moving from coal to natural gas. Now people say, well, hey, natural gas, you know, it's only 1.5 cents more than what coal was. But let's be clear, that was a 100% increase in input costs, because it was 1.5 cents cost for coal, and when you went to natural gas, it was 3 cents. Now that's during when they were doing that. We know what the cost of natural gas is today. It's 6.1 cents. So we're now seeing a major increase in costs of delivering the electricity grid. That all has to be addressed, obviously, but we're not going to be able to go back to these guys and say, go back to coal. The whole world is moving away from coal, other than China and India. But our you know, all of the first world countries are all moving away from coal. So those input costs are going to be borne by us. That's why we're seeing such an increase. But it was that, you know, it was a perfect storm, because you had all of these things happening at once, and then this last winter, that's when we got hit with all of this stuff.
Thank you, Grant. Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So my question is on the fire service training grant that was cut in 2020. So it was cut by Minister Mado in 2020. The same year, the province of BC added $5 million to the volunteer composite fire departments for training and equipment. And the province is expecting more and more from municipal departments when we have big events such as the Fort McMurrays, the Slave Lakes, the floodings, where you pull our resources out, and that way you don't have to have a full-time fire department like you have a full-time EMS department. And so the question is fire departments may be local responsibility. However, Alberta fire departments play a large role in the overall emergency preparedness and response in Alberta. Would the Alberta government, municipal affairs, consider reinstating this training grant? And considering and keeping in mind that 90% of that money went back to municipal affairs through accreditation and certification through when you had an Office of the Fire Commissioner, which is now abolished, but there still is a certification and training within municipal affairs. So that $500,000, the government got $400,000 of that back from the local fire departments that hosted these departments through municipal affairs, through the Office of the Fire Commissioner. So it was good return on your investment, and you were training tens of thousands of firefighters every year to a standard and a level that the government was setting out, not the municipalities that we needed to meet.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to break the trend here of talking lots, and I'm just going to say, yes, we're looking at it. And the reason why is because we've got some windfall gains with oil and gas, and we're in a better position. The last 3 years have been tough, as you know. We had a $10 billion structural deficit, and it's just tough to be able to make the money work. And so you were looking under pillows for pennies, literally. And then healthcare costs with COVID. I mean, we put $3 billion into COVID to be able to address a pandemic. And, you know, it's already a $23 billion corporation, AHS. And we put another $3 billion into it over the last couple of years. I mean, it has been a tough 3 years to be able to get where we're at. So yes, I know that it's a little bit of money, and yeah, we were looking for pennies everywhere we could, but I know this issue, and I've actually got a brief back from the department, and yes, they are looking at that stuff.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Van Rijn, and through to Mr. Hunter, and welcome here today. Just maybe a couple of things I'll begin with. One is our Coaldale is looking at bidding on the Southern Alberta Games for 2024, and I'd just like to ask for your support in our bid and for as we progress on that course. And the second thing I'd like to bring up is I think it was brought up at Mayors and Reeves about the City of Lethbridge, has a request for a cardiac catheterization lab at the Chinook Regional Hospital. And so I personally, from my point of view, I fully support their request, and I'm sure other municipalities are embarking on supporting it as well. So I guess my question to you would be is, do we make those requests through you, or do we just write a letter on behalf of, say, the town of Coaldale supporting their request?
So to answer your second question, you would write as a town in support of that to the minister. There is some major capital projects going on, as you know. The Red Deer Regional Hospital has been announced, and they are going to get a cath lab. So I think the precedence has been set now, and I think that Lethbridge will also be in the running for a cath lab as well. In terms of your first question, yes, I would be very much in favor of writing a co-letter or a supporting letter for your bid.
Jordan, have you got nothing? Okay, so I just have a question regarding our healthcare center. We need our Coaldale urgent care back. People from Coaldale are going to Raymond to emergency there. Raymond Healthcare Center has a much more robust setup with less than half the population of Coaldale. And in fact, I got an email this morning from a resident, and I'll just read it to you. It says here, is there anyone we can be petitioning to get the urgent care in Coaldale opened back up? It's desperately needed, a resource in this town. I had to drive out to Tabor this morning to get my oxygen levels checked because they're legally not allowed to do anything here in Coaldale. My son fell at the playground a couple of months ago and needed some head stitches, and the same thing. The nurses I spoke to were very frustrated at not being able to help, and I know my Coaldale doctor is also very frustrated. What a waste of our excellent local resources and infrastructure. Is there anything town council and citizens of the town can do to get back up and running our urgent care?
Yeah. So I did get a brief back on this one, Mayor, and can you let me keep on working on this one? They gave their rationale for the reasons why it was changed. I wasn't completely comfortable with their arguments. I think that I could probably make some other arguments. Maybe we can take this offline and we can talk about it. This sort of thing, when we to be able to elicit the change that we need on that, Mayor, it's going to take some time. And so I've heard the value proposition that you've just presented. I've seen it in your question. I think that there is an argument to be made, and I think we just need to keep on working on that.
Okay, thank you. And maybe, if possible, for our meeting on May 16th, you might be able to get an update for us for that meeting.
Sure, you bet.
Okay, so I'll open up to council one more time. Is there any questions for Grant? Okay, Grant, so unless you have anything else to say, I wanted to thank you on behalf of council for coming out this evening, and look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks so much. Appreciate being here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5.2. We have a delegation here this evening from the Gem of the West Museum. We have the president of the Gem of the West Museum Society, Lynden Hutchinson, and we have Craig Day, the manager of the museum. So welcome, gentlemen. You want to take a seat? And then we have your PowerPoint up on the screen. And the mouse is in front of you there. If you guys want to turn your mics on as well, please.
Okay. Okay.
And whenever you're ready, we're ready.
All right.
Thanks, Jack, and council for inviting the Gem of the West to come and praise you and thank you for your support and your cooperation over the years, and that continues. And we have Dale sitting on our board and helping us, I guess, work through our problems. I think it's kind of a unique facility in the fact that the town is paying most of the bills of the building and heating it, but our committee, our job is to run the displays and make sure they're up to date, and between the two of us, we have kind of a unique, I guess, the structure that probably aids in enticing tourism in the town, and also we're finding lately there's a lot of local people that are coming to the museum that lived there their whole life that haven't been there before. So, so I think I'm just going to say thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Craig and his PowerPoint, and and then if you have any questions at the end, we'll try and answer them.
All right.
Craig, if you could just pull your microphone a little closer to you.
All right. Is that good there? Okay. As well, thank you for having us and the amazing support that the town has given us. We'd just like to kind of go over our last year of all the things that the town has done and the progress that the museum has made going forward. So, as I'm not sure if all of you are aware, but one of the major projects that went on last summer was the museum basement had water issues in it, and during the summer, I believe in June, was of water seeped in the heaviest, and it impacted one of our exhibits in the Indigenous space. And then last summer, they undertook that extensive project of excavating out and doing restorations on the foundation to ensure that there was proper drainage and it was sealed, and that came with many obstacles along the ways, of wasps' nests to extra sidewalks to many extra loads of concrete having to be removed. So, and some of the work that went in, was it not? Here we go. So yes, along the way, we did our best to capture all the work and document it as the historians we are. But going forward, the sealing, the vapor, or like the moisture barriers, and the proper drainage and pumping systems that were all in place, and the finished product was redoing the sidewalk and the asphalt on the other side, and it has definitely improved the situation. We're still waiting for the big storm to put it to the test, but so far we have seen great success in that project. The other project that I know began and is one that the town is kind of committed to going forward with is we are with historic building. The natural wooden windows are a very prime target for the northern flickers especially. And in December we had 4 of those windows replaced, and here you can kind of see the damage on the north side where they like to target the joints of the windows, but with the work done, we now have ensure the longevity of the building with these type of projects. So, and then also another one that was undertaken is as historians, we like to preserve the past and understand that it is a very delicate balance act, and especially with the history of the Bible school connected to the Mennonite Brethren Church and the museum itself. We know that not everything can be saved, but we did our diligence in photographically documenting it before its demise. So with proper permission, I went through and documented some of the really interesting features of the building that we get to now at least preserve in a digital format. So, and then as we see it reaches its fate. And we look forward to seeing what comes of the space, and hopefully something that we can enjoy as well, next being neighbors to that space. So, and then one of the projects we undertook as far as our society went is we had this tall chain link fence with privacy slats, and we had farm equipment on the north side of the property. And what we did was remove those slats and actually lower the fence top post down and created a very visual display for visitors coming in, so they can actually see this equipment that was previously rather hidden. And we are looking at expanding this even further by developing an entrance arch and further information boards discussing the equipment and the importance of farming as far as Coaldale goes, and even discussing the ready-made area and the history associated. So also, I believe some wind took care of our front fence, which was removed as well. So, but it creates a nice open atmosphere that we really look forward to. So, so this is where, looking north, where the fire hydrant is, and where we are looking at potentially adding our gate area and our information boards. So we're looking at creating a sign and continue the flow of the ready-made barn style profile as far as the gate goes. So, and then with COVID, like everyone has struggled, we found ways to adapt and used the inability to have visitors in the museum as an opportunity to expand our accessioning database. So we have a large collection of artifacts in the museum that over the years have been documented based on paper, but we have now, with the growing technology, there's a database called Past Perfect, in which we can photograph and have it electronically, and hopes for the future to have this shareable and searchable by all the community members like many other museums have. So one of the undertakings is capturing all these artifacts and documenting all the history about it on a digital database. So last summer, with the summer student and myself, we accessioned probably close to 1,000 items on the main floor of our museum, and have those captured into our database, and plan to continue the work, which we predict to be at least another multi-year project. So, and yeah, as you can see in our collections, and we have a cold storage as well, we still have the ways to go. So, then we do add modern elements into our museum. We're trying to stay with the technology per se. So we have this new touchscreen computer actually set up in the main room of the museum, which will incorporate the art gallery aspect of the museum to have all the artwork be accessible at all times to visitors. And it'll have the information about our artists. So this is our old program that was utilized before, and we're looking at combining it together to, so before it just existed with the information about the artist, and we're looking at updating it so that you can actually see the artist's work with that information. So it'll be a complete picture that we're looking at presenting here. So we, even though being closed, and we did have a short season last year, there was some fun opportunities with events being held there, which one, I had the pleasure of meeting John Ward Hannum, and he actually came in with his film crew and filmed one of his music videos in the museum, and it was a really fun experience in the evening, that working with him and getting that kind of exposure for the museum in a mutual relationship, similar to what we have with the town as well. So, and then, yeah, if you're ever interested in seeing the footage that he did do, that's he has all his videos on YouTube as well. So, and as far as accessioning goes, we have these two really key components, artifacts in our collection. One would be the 1928 Studebaker from the Gertsen family, which we pulled out of our cold storage and actually had it on the Main Street celebration last year. And we now have it stored over at the museum in hopes of getting it out more and more for events. And along with that, in our accessioning, we've acquired proper documentation for the museum to go with our record keeping and updating that. So the second piece that just came to which we've had in our collection, but officially documented last year as well, was the Skiba family 1938 Farmall tractor, which CNS Custom was gracious enough to restore for us as well, and they put in lots of hours, but created such a beautiful tractor that to this day still runs. So, and having that in our collection, which is also at the museum now, is going to be valuable for our farm display that we're looking to expand on the north there. So. So the previous museum manager spent countless hours combing through the old history blue book that was printed in 1983 and created our new book that we were actually able to publish at the start of last year. And it created a very much more friendly read rather than a research approach to it. And I merely took the easy approach of finding funding and getting it published, but she definitely put in the hours as far as creating this beautiful Coaldale history book. So, yes, and there's kind of the discussions along the way of capturing every little aspect of Coaldale. So, and then on to current projects. One that we've got support from many sources, including Coaldale, the town, is with the foundation work done, we are rejuvenating the Indigenous exhibit. We're adding a digital element similar to what we have in our cafe exhibit, which will have videos, a button-activated system, up to 10 different videos discussing history. We're going to incorporate a mock archaeology excavation site, and then have all updated information boards discussing the importance of the Blackfoot Confederacy in the area. So, and that has been working with experts in the field as far as Duncan Lloyd and Neil Moreau is with Arrow Archaeology. So yeah, we're going to have some really exciting times. Last year, we also involved ourselves with, I personally tried to be out as much as I could with the community events that were hosted. One with the mass registration of barbecue, we had a presence there, and then with the Main Street celebration, we had our artifact car and offered walking tours discussing some of the history of the Main Street buildings. So, and again, going into the future, we have a workspace that was heavily used during the restoration of the church itself, but going forward, that it is kind of been more storage in a way. So along the lines of the blacksmith shop that we have out there, which is a separate building, we're looking at potentially converting this space into an additional exhibit space and being able to house the car and discuss some of the other key aspects of Coaldale, along with the amount of garages and gas stations and blacksmith shops that existed. So, but we're always moving forward, always looking at new ways to continue our involvement in the community, and having the town support us has been immense in that journey. And I'm still relatively new to that journey, but I've enjoyed it so far and look forward to many years to come. So I just want to, thank you for listening and your time. Oh, I guess on a side note, we are actually able to host our first event since 2019. So coming up this May is going to be our concert and dessert auction with Gabrielle Thane as our musical entertainment, and we're going to have some desserts to be auctioned off. So, and posters and tickets to hopefully be out this week. So thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So just a couple of questions then before I open it up to council. With the restoration of that Farmall tractor and the Studebaker, is that something that you can put in our parade this year?
It's just been waiting for a parade.
Yeah, absolutely. We can have one or both, or
Okay.
both are drivable and would enjoy being driven, I think.
Yeah. We'll look forward to having you bring that out. That's going to be on August the 6th, so make sure you mark that date down. And then when I was at the AGM with Councillor Pickering, there were some discussions about you needed some grading done by the farm equipment. Does that still need to be done, or is that being looked after?
Well, we've been in discussions with some of the town employees. It's where that farm machinery you saw there, it's about a foot lower than the pavement in the parking lot, so there was some concern with the grass growing around in the machinery now, so the only way to really remove that is weed whipping, and that's which the town does for us. But, so there was some discussion of putting some clay in there and some gravel so we can actually be able to walk in there if it's wet, but we could also spray out the weeds and the gravel. So I think there's been a budget number that someone presented, I forget who, Kaylin, and I don't know what's happened to that, but it would just enhance that area. So right now, if it rains in there, you can't really walk out there, and then the weeds are growing, grass and stuff growing up among the machinery. So
And is that the same area that you want those posts and chain as well?
Yeah, it's the same area where we're looking at the gate and the signage. So
Okay.
yeah, we look at ways of enhancing it. So
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't forgotten, so I'll open it up to the floor. Is there any questions for either Lynden or Craig? Okay, well, keep up doing a good job that you're doing there, and I think council is going to talk about getting some tickets and coming out to your pie and concert
that sounds good.
in May, so we're looking forward to that. So.
perfect. No, that sounds amazing. So
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming.
thank you so much for your
for
time.
the opportunity.
And could I get someone to make a motion that we accept the Gem of the West delegation presentation as information? Councillor Saylor, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And then I just need to back up and get someone to pass our MLA Grant Hunter's report as information as well. Councillor Chapman, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 7.1. We have our CFO, Kyle Beauchamp, our Chief Financial Officer, discussing a supplementary assessment tax bylaw 846-C-04-22, and we're hoping to do all three readings this evening. Kyle, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you and good evening, Council. Yeah, so we have the supplemental assessment tax bylaw. This tax bylaw, as we get into tax season, has to be passed every year. So Council will expect this on a going forward basis each year. The town of Coaldale budget's $30,000 for supplemental tax revenue each year. These tax notices go out in December at the end of each year. So essentially, a supplemental tax assessment is for any change in the value of any physical change in the construction or new home build that occurs sometime throughout the taxation year. So, for example, if you start building a new house this year, it's not completed as of December 31st, but that house is, say, completed as of October 1st, that supplemental tax assessment is for 3 months at the new value of that completed build. So City of Edmonton has a really good short video that I put into the council agenda. I'm not going to show it, but it kind of puts it into a little bit layman's terms on what is required for that. Just of note, supplemental assessment isn't a requirement for a municipality, but it is a tax bylaw that Town of Colo has historically had for a number of years. With that being said, Council has options to present all 3 readings today, first reading only, or to request further information before proceeding with this bylaw. So I will turn it back to Council for any questions they may have.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. I just have a question for our viewers at home. Like, why does this have to come back every year to council to get?
It's just a requirement under the MGA, as you know, council has to pass a mill rate bylaw each year. Council also has to pass this bylaw each year as well, because it's not required by a municipality to have. So each year council has to make the motion and the bylaw to allow the municipality to proceed with this each year. So it's just following the P's and Q's with the MGA Act.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for Kyle from council? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Kyle, just 2 quick questions. One, on improvements, anything lower than, is it $1,000 that doesn't need to be applied for when they're doing an improvement on a property? I can't remember what that number is.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's more of a development question that I wouldn't be able to answer.
Second to that, then, benchmark, say, for example, like they do the assessment on property, and so you can, any resident or any property owner that's questioning improvements or questioning their assessment still can come through you or through benchmark and either look for advice or direction or appeal at the end of the day?
Generally, what happens if a resident or a business is concerned with their assessed value, they can contact us, and then we can kind of do those initial discussions. If the problem isn't resolved at that level, we do refer them, yes, to benchmark assessments, who is our contracted assessor. A lot of times those issues are solved then between a conversation with the assessor and with the taxpayer. And again, at that moment, if they're still not satisfied with the answer they've received, they can appeal their assessed value to a particular board that will render a judgment on that.
Thank you. I'll, if there aren't any more questions, I'll move for first reading.
Councillor Chapman's moving for first reading of Supplementary Assessment Tax Bylaw 846-C-04-22. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Oh, Councillor Reese, are you voting on this?
I was going to vote a different way. So.
We have to have unanimous consent on first reading.
In terms of unanimous consent, you don't need that on first reading, but in order to receive all 3 readings this evening, council would have to have unanimity.
Yes.
So what I would do is push this into the next meeting to do third and final reading.
Okay.
That's the only implication, which is council's right. You don't have to have unanimous vote on any one of the readings, but that's just the implication for scheduling. So.
Okay. So then motion stands by Councillor Chapman for first reading. Any further discussion? All those in favor one more time? Okay, carried now unanimously. Thank you. And calling for second reading. Anyone want to sponsor second reading? Councillor Saylor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we need someone to sponsor unanimous consent. Councillor Reese. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And then for third and final reading, can I get someone to sponsor that? Councillor Beekman. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, Kyle, moving on to item 7.2, the Special Tax Recreation Bylaw 847-C-04-22. And again, we're hoping to do 3 readings this evening. Kyle, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So this bylaw is referred to essentially as the recreation levy tax that is issued for each developed parcel of land within the municipal boundaries of the town of Coaldale. It is charged at the rate of $120 per developed residential parcel of land. So this bylaw is to fund the revenue from this bylaw is to fund the debenture debt of $10 million, which is to partially fund the construction and design of the new multi-use recreation facility that has currently begun construction. Council each year will have to review and pass this bylaw, so this is an annual task as well. I don't have much further information on that. I will turn that back to council for any questions that they have on this as well.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Is there any questions for our CFO? Councillor Beekman.
Mayor, through to Kyle. First off, can we get a ballpark? What have we, when did this rec levy come into play, and how much have we taken in from there?
2019, I believe, was the first year.
Okay.
And it is annually, it started at $380,000 in revenue total.
Yep.
This past year, we were at $386,000. So the slight increase was just due to increased residential units.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions for Kyle? Councillor Pickering.
So this levy, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Kyle. This levy that you're putting on, this is going to be to pay for the debenture? What, I'm just curious, how much revenue are we going to be taking in, which we had from rental on that rec center? Isn't it supposed to support its debenture, or is this figured in the whole way?
So I'll kind of break this down into 2 ways. So the funding of the debenture, the annual cost on that is approximately $550,000 a year. So the rec levy funds the majority of it. The other portion of this is funded through our recreation agreement, recreation funding that we received through the county. So that those 2 amounts essentially fund the $10 million debenture payment. The rental revenue that you're referring to as part of the facility once it's operating will go back into the funding the operational costs of the facility. So under the business case that's kind of been developed, the user fees from the facility and the rental revenue from the facility we're projecting will cover the operating costs for the facility. So this is just for the capital construction, and the rental revenue is part of the operational business plan for this facility.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you. Pulling back the reins here a little bit to our last council meeting, item 9.1, we passed a motion to allocate $465,749 to the multi-use rec center capital reserve. Now that is separate from what this from what the 120 is servicing.
Correct. So the total cost of the facility is expected to be that 18.8 million. So of that 10 million is being funded through debenture debt. So this levy is only used to fund the $10 million portion of that debenture debt. So the excess cost, part of that, all of that 400,000 that you're referring to, will go towards funding the costs, part of the costs over the $10 million.
Okay, thank you. So can I get someone to sponsor first reading of special tax recreation bylaw 847-C-04-22? Deputy Mayor Avery?
Yes, I'll sponsor first reading. I also have a question. When you say develop residential parcel, does that mean once a developer has sold that parcel to another person for construction, they now are going to be taxed 120, or no? It's when there is an actual structure on the lot.
Sorry, just one. I just have to refresh my memory here. So the rate of special tax imposed is based on each developed residential parcel of land within the municipal boundaries of the town of Coaldale. Rate per developed residential parcel of land. I believe the interpretation of that is once the land has been subdivided, right? So once a developer, and our CAO, he might be able to assist me on this, but I believe it's once the land is actually subdivided and then developer subdivided, it's subjected to the $120 rec levy. That's.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a great question. I'm 90% sure our CFO is correct, but that's something I'd want to just double check. Very good, detailed question.
Yes, it hasn't been asked in a while, and it slipped my mind, so thanks for the question.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Deputy Mayor Avery for first reading. Is there any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Can I get someone to sponsor second reading? Councillor Beekman. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I need someone to sponsor that provide unanimous consent to hold all three readings in one meeting for special tax recreation bylaw 847-C-04-22. Can I get a sponsor for that? Councillor Pickering. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. And third and final reading, Councillor Chapman. Any further discussion? All those in favor? I'll call. Passed unanimously. Go ahead, Kaylin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did find the answer. I'm not normally this quick to respond to inquiries, but the rec levy does not apply to undeveloped residential parcels of land because the argument is that there are no beneficiaries that live on that property, therefore they don't pay the 120. So just to clarify that.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, moving on to, thank you, Kyle. Moving on to item 8.1 under new business. We have our 2021 audited financial statements. We have Calvin Scott here from Avail, and Kyle is going to assist in presenting that to council this evening.
Okay, so the big moment. So for us accountants, this is a good time of the year. So we have our audited financial statements here completed. So as part of the presentation, I will quickly go through the actual numbers on the financial statements, present those to council. Then Calvin will go over the auditor's report for the financial statements. And then after that, we will turn that back to council for questions on the report. If you do have any questions as we go, just feel free to interrupt me. What I've tried to do here as part of the presentation to make this a little simpler to follow is have the statement name at the top, followed by what page this is on the what page this is of the financial statements. So if you do want to follow along, first thing, statement of financial position is on page 4 of the financial statements. So the statement of financial position is essentially the balance sheet for the town of Coaldale. Contains the assets, liabilities, and the equity. It's at a specific date, so that being our year end at December 31st, 2021, with comparative information the previous year, that being 2020. When you do see a note throughout, note in brackets throughout the financial statements, there is further supplemental detail noted in the financial statements notes, which may have further information on that specific line item. So you will see that the statement of financial positions is broken out: financial assets, financial liabilities, and non-financial assets. So financial assets are assets of the town of Coaldale that are liquid or can be liquid, which is essentially turned into cash within a period not greater than expected 1 year. Financial liabilities are essentially all the liabilities for the town of Coaldale. And non-financial assets are other financial assets of the town that are not liquid, such as capital assets, or not expected to be liquid, turned into cash within a period of 1 year. So here are the actual figures, kind of a screenshot for the statement of financial position that we do have. I'll go through a variance of those here. So cash and investments accumulated to just over $31 million at the end of the year, remaining relatively consistent from the previous year. Council will see that our receivables, they have increased from the previous year, totaling 2.96 at the end of the year. This increase is largely due to additional grants and GST receivable from our capital projects and land sales at the end of the year. The receivables consist of property tax, utilities, GST franchise fees, land sales, grants, and other miscellaneous amounts that are owed to the municipality, but we have not yet collected on those amounts. Land held for resale. This is the original purchase value of the Northeast Industrial land that has not yet been sold. So you can see this is a very nominal number, meaning that the land was purchased for a small amount way back, and that we do have very little inventory in the Northeast Industrial Park at the end of the year. The liabilities, so accounts payable and accrued liabilities did increase, so there is a larger increase of a few $1 million there, totaling 6.4 at the end of the year compared to 2.9 the previous year. This increase is due to an increase in the amount of holdbacks payable that we owe for capital projects. So when a capital project is undergoing, generally 10% of the construction payments are withheld and paid once the project is completed or the warranty period is completed. With a large investment in capital projects for Coaldale this year, that figure was much higher. Deposit liabilities consist of payments that the town has received from developers that will generally be refunded once specific work and guidelines have been completed. There was a large increase in this from the previous year as we received a deposit for a subdivision in the year. Deferred revenue. Deferred revenue essentially relates to any funds that the town has received but not yet earned or recognized into revenue. So this, to kind of simplify that, so when we receive grants such as our MSI or our gas tax funds, we don't recognize those as revenue until we spend them. So the majority of those funds you see in deferred revenue are grants that we have already received, but we have not yet allocate them, or so we've not yet spent those funds on capital projects. Our liabilities, employee benefit obligation consists of vacation and overtime that employees have earned but not yet taken at the end of the year. Long-term debt, we did repay just under $1 million in long-term debt this past year. In January of 2021, in December of 2020, we did repay $1.34 million in debt, but we refinanced that due to significant savings in interest rates. So we paid it off in December, and then we got the new debt in January. So that was just a measure to refinance that to save on interest rates. So that's kind of why it shows that debt increased in the year, but it was just kind of a timing thing there with the refinancing. Administration is planning to repay this debt in 2020. We're going to look at after a tax deadline just to manage our cash flow as well, to save on interest costs there. So I've kind of have a trend here for you. The top line here is the financial assets of the town of Coaldale over 5 years, with the bottom line being the financial liabilities. Council will see there is a big jump here in 2019. This is due to the $10 million debenture for the recreation site being pulled within that year. So as that $10 million gets accumulated, our debt owing on that goes up, but we didn't spend it. We didn't spend the majority of it even yet, so that cash was just essentially sitting in our bank account at that time. So here's kind of the trend analysis here. Non-financial assets. So again, this essentially consists of TCA. When I say TCA, that's just our capital assets. The items of significance that were invested this year were the rec center, the lagoon upgrades, and civic square. It's important to note that when we purchase TCA and record it as a financial asset, the entire purchase price is recorded as an asset on our financial statements, and then the cost of that is amortized over the expected useful life of the asset. So when I say amortized, we expense that asset over the period of time that we expect we're going to be using it. So kind of an example here is if we purchase a piece of equipment for $100,000, that $100,000 is recorded as an asset on our financial statements. If that piece of equipment is expected to be used for 10 years, we essentially expense it evenly over those 10 years. Any questions so far, or am I good to continue?
Any questions for Kyle?
Okay. So here is just again trend showing $91 million in non-financial assets 5 years ago to where we are now is $125 million. This is the amortized cost of the assets. And this is the one that's probably the most important. Is it shows the council's capital investment within the town of Coaldale over the past 5 years. So from 2017 all the way to 2001, total capital investment in Coaldale for this past year was just under $18 million, which was almost double of what was from the year before. Again, the large reason for that is these capital projects that were planned years before largely started construction this year, with the big ones being as we have on the screen here, the lagoon. So the total cost for that was just under $8 million. Northwest Coaldale infrastructure, 2.8. So these are all costs that were accumulated for 2021. These aren't the total cost for the project, as some of these may have costs from previous years, to which they haven't been included in this slide. Going left to right here, so the funding source I've just included for council, some details of how these projects are being funded. You will see some are grants, which would be either the lagoon grant or MSI or a gas tax grant. Reserves are essentially our savings accounts. So we do have like an operating account and our savings account. Savings account is what we kind of use for future expenses. And you see some of these were paid for land sales through various transactions. And just to conclude here on the capital investment, again, just a list of all the other costs incurred during the year. Statement of operation accumulated surplus. So to break this down a little bit easier, this is essentially our income statement. So it shows our revenues at the top here, followed by our expenses and our accumulated retained earnings at the end of the year here. Left to right on this statement here, we do have our budgeted amounts, year-to-date amounts for the year, and comparisons from 2020. So I'll just kind of do a quick variance analysis here. So revenues were higher than budgeted. So user fees and sales of goods and services was just under $300,000 higher. It's largely due to increased utility revenue received from higher consumption during the year. Summer months, we did see our consumption spike much more than historical averages just due to the prolonged summer and hot months. Our government transfers, so for operating, this is essentially our operating grants. This is where we saw the $200,000 reduction in our annual MSI operating grant. And this $200,000 reduction is kind of a going forward basis, unfortunately. The biggest increase for revenue was our industrial development park, which had total sales of $3.4 million in the year. Of this revenue, we don't budget any of this for our operating budget. All of this goes 100% back to the capital reserves and capital funds that town council can approve for future projects as well. License permits fees, $128,000 higher. This increase kind of happened because subdivision fees are now being collected by the town of Coaldale. We're no longer using ORSC for this. So as these projects happen, the town of Coaldale collects this revenue. This is more of a this revenue is subject to kind of big fluctuations. As subdivisions come online, higher revenues, but if you don't have any during the year, then this will obviously decrease. Total of $502,000 in revenue for donations from the Coaldale Strong campaign as well that were received. This is just a trend projection showing our operating revenues for the past 5 years. You can see they're going up here. The spike in 2020 followed by the drop off here. Part of 2020 we received a $900,000 essentially COVID operating grant from the provincial government. So this amount is included in here, but you can see if to normalize it, if that was excluded, we would still have that increasing trend for operating revenues. Expenses for the year were fairly consistent with our budgeted amounts. However, we did have a $1.6 million increase from the previous year. Some items of note: our RCMP costs totaled $1.8 million for the year. This compared to 1.3 from the previous year and a budget amount of 1.6. So included in this amount, we did have the back pay from the new RCMP agreement that was signed between the RCMP and the federal government that we estimate at $260,000. This amount has not been paid yet, but we have just essentially booked the expense for this past year and recorded it into our accounts payable. So this is why you do see the RCMP expense so much higher this year. Some kind of accrual items of note. So page 10, segmented disclosure. This goes and shows the revenue and expenses by different functions. So general government, protective services, transportation, which is essentially our public works, planning, development, engineering, recreation and culture, which is rec, culture, parks, community services, and our environmental services, which is our utility services. So it breaks down, if you're ever looking for more details or to fall asleep, it's got some good items here for you as well. Talking a little bit more details on the expense side here. So we do have the expenses from left to right broken out by category, so salaries and wages, contracted services and such. We do have the 2021 actual versus budget and the resulting surplus or deficit when you see a figure in brackets here. So we did have a surplus of $318,000 for salary and wages. There were some delays in hiring new positions, recruitment time. We did also have some short-term vacancies due to COVID and staff being on medical leave or leave of absences for the year that accumulated to this surplus. Materials and supplies, there was nothing of significance, one item that amounted to this surplus. Departments that say have a 5% or 10% surplus in this just kind of accumulated to this total amount here. And this is just a comparison to the last year as well. So the only thing that's really changed here is instead of the budget amounts, I've got the previous year amounts here. So you can see the policing expense was $530,000 higher than last year. The sewer lining project, we had more traffic on this, which was $150,000 higher. And the the traffic light construction project on Highway 3 and 30th Street, we total cost for the year $415,000. Again, just a quick trend projection here for the past 5 years of our operating expenses over the last period of time. As we kind of close up here, so our annual surplus for the year totaled $11.2 million. compared to 6.4 last year and a budget amount of $9 million. So this annual surplus here of this 11 million does seem quite large. How this works is when we receive a government grant for our capital projects, such as the Lagoon or the MSI, that gets recorded 100% as revenue at the time. So this 8.5 million. But if we kind of talk about capital assets again, those assets get expensed over the use of the life of the asset. So there's a little timing difference there. So this does not mean we have necessarily an extra $11 million. It's kind of to show that we've got a large amount of capital grants that we received and spent in the year. So this graph here, the top one shows the annual surplus over the past 5 years for the town of Coaldale. When I take out that government transfer, so that capital revenue, that's the bottom line here. So this shows our basically our net income for the past 5 years if we exclude those capital grants which have that timing difference. So you can see without that, our surplus for the year was 2.6 million. Okay, so in looking at what our unrestricted surplus is, so this kind of goes back to last council meeting at March 28th. This figure isn't stated specifically on the financial statements, but it's essentially the amount that for the actual unrestricted surplus. So this is the surplus that we have at the end of the year that we haven't spent or we haven't allocated to any other specific projects. That one for the year totaled $704,000. Last year you can see that was $2 million, and in 2019 that was $415,000. So again, the large variance from last year was we did have some excess funds and grants from the government of Alberta there for COVID relief grants. Actually, I will let Calvin jump in first on the auditor's report before we kind of go on any questions there. So, Calvin, the floor is yours.
This is my favorite kind of presentation where I have to do nothing except for 2 pages of financial statements. The independent auditor's report is a 2-page report. In this case, we have provided a clean opinion. So these statements are presented in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. The independent auditor report also shows that these statements are the responsibility of management. It states that you as council are responsible for the oversight of management in preparing these statements. And it goes through the responsibilities of the auditor, which would be myself and my team. And our responsibilities are to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, to make sure we understand the internal controls of the town, to evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies that are presented in these financial statements, to conclude on the assumption or the appropriateness of management's assumption of going concern, so your ability to continue on into the future, and to evaluate the overall presentation and structure of these financial statements. And because we had no issues with any of those, again, a clean opinion. Had it not been a clean opinion, you would have known far before this meeting. That is your independent auditor's report, so a nice easy one for me.
So that kind of concludes the presentation from our end on that. I'll turn it back to council for any questions.
Well, thank you, Kyle, for a very in-depth presentation that you did this evening, and please pass on our gratitude to your team. And I'll open it up to the floor for any questions. You did such a good job on your presentation, you're going to get off scot-free here. I just have one question. Could you do us a favor, and back when we were doing the budget deliberations, you had one of your PowerPoint slides, you had the current debenture list. Can you email that out to us? That shows everything that's outstanding, where we're at with that?
Sure. One question on that. Are you looking just for that exact amount from, that one was December 31st values from?
Right up to current.
You want the current updated ones? Yeah,
yes.
I can do that.
Okay, appreciate that. And then Calvin, for recommendations that come from you to do any things different. Did any of that come up?
We
with
had
this?
no significant issues to bring to your attention in the management letter, no. You
Well,
have
I
a
didn't-
wonderful team of qualified people that do a great job.
Right, I wasn't referring to issues, I was referring to any recommendations as far as what we can do to be better, or,
Not from the financial statement side of things or process-wise. The internal control reviews that we do on an annual basis didn't indicate any requirement for change or any improvements whatsoever.
so there's kind of a template you use from year to year?
I wouldn't say a template necessarily, but a general assessment of best practices, and there were no issues by any means from our perspective.
Okay, appreciate that. Okay. Deputy Mayor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. On the one slide, Kyle, and I'm sure there's a good explanation, but we took a debenture, we took a loan, we bought land, we paid it off, we took a loan, and now we're going to pay it off again. Is there a reason why we're going to pay it off early? Is it a high interest rate again, or?
No, so the first reason we did refinance it was we just got a really good deal on it. We're just looking at it, repaying it just for to save. It is a low interest rate, but it is still higher than what we're earning on the cash in our bank account. So we're just looking at it strictly as a cash flow management. How can we best utilize the cash that we have to reduce carrying costs and interest expenses?
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, could I get someone to, oh, sorry.
I didn't have a question, I was going to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to make a motion that council approve the 2021 audited financial statements.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kyle and Calvin. Okay, moving on to item 8.2, Community Grant 2021 Extension Request. We have our Community Services Manager, Cindy Hoffman, presenting. Welcome, Cindy. And Mel is there too. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So this report is to request an extension of Town Council on behalf of the Healthy Communities by Design Pilot Group for the spending of 2021 Community Grant funding. The extension was given one other time during COVID restrictions. That was in 2019. So this is the first request for extension not related to COVID restrictions since the inception of the program. Originally, the grant funding deadline was May 1st, 2022. This request is to ask for an extension to December 1st, 2022. The Healthy Communities by Design pilot grant application and funding of $4,000 is intended for career and life management students to develop a community improvement project that responds to future health needs in the community. Initially, the funding was intended to be used for this project by September 2021 to bring the community project led by Kate Andrews High School students to completion. The group is still working hard to accomplish their initiatives and need the additional time to meet their goals. Just something to consider, the community grant supports many worthwhile projects, and from time to time, project plans may be hindered or changed due to a number of reasons beyond the control of the organizers or with new information being received. It is important that grant money be used within the time requirements of the program and to the intended purpose. However, if valid reasons for a reasonable time extension are communicated and explained, it is administration's view that from time to time, extensions are granted in order to complete valuable community projects. So there are two options that Council approve an extension until December 21st, 2022 for the Healthy Communities by Design pilot project, or option number 2, that Council not approve the extension and request that all 2021 funding be returned to the community grant account. Our recommendation is that council approve the extension to December 21st, 2022 for the Healthy Communities by Design pilot project. And Melanie is leading that particular project with the Kate Andrews High School students, so she has attended as well if there are any questions.
Questions for Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and please send our thank yous to the Kate Andrews group for their hard work and their patience, particularly to this, to their work and their vision for Coaldale. So just send on our regards, and that I'd be happy to go with option number 1 if there are no more questions, that we approve the extension until December 21st of 22.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
And
Thank you, Council.
Cindy, you can just stay there, and Mel, we're going to
Okay.
just jump ahead on the agenda so that we have our community volunteers here. We'll jump up to agenda item 10.1, the new Coaldale Summer Event name.
Get reorganized here, Clayton.
We have Clayton Varsity with us this evening, and we have Tammy Trellenberg. And Tammy, congratulations on your Citizen of the Year award.
Thank you.
Well deserved. So, Clayton, it looks like you're going to be doing the presentation.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will
Thank
be.
you.
All right, good evening. Coaldale Summer Event Planning Committee is seeking council's approval concerning a name for Coaldale's new summer event. Council has previously approved the location and date for Coaldale's new summer event at the November 22nd, 2021 council meeting. Council's decision was to hold a new event on the weekend following August Long each year and hold the event in the downtown core. Additionally, council directed administration to work with the Summer Event Planning Committee to explore a name for the event. Council then approved a draft public participation plan at the February 28th, 2022 council meeting, which was implemented from March 1st, 2022 to March 27th, 2022, with the Summer Event Planning Committee leading the charge. In 2021, a one-time event called Celebrate Maine was held on August 6th to 7th, which is the same corresponding weekend. This vibrant and highly successful celebration was due in part to new community partnerships with Coaldale Custom Cruisers and many Main Street businesses. The success of this event posed the question and subsequent conversation concerning time, location, and a name for Coaldale's new event. Building on the success from last year, the Summer Event Planning Committee initiated the report that subsequently resulted in Council's decision to hold the event in August on Main Street. The committee continues to guide the community through the process of naming the event. A public engagement survey concerning the new event ran from March 1st, 2022 to March 27th, 2022. The purpose of the survey was to allow community members opportunities to share what they felt Coaldale's values are and to allow opportunity for participants to suggest names for the event. As a result, from the survey, the Summer Event Planning Committee is recommending the name of the event be called Coaldale Summerfest. Although simple and straightforward, the committee feels that this name evokes a vibe of excitement, fun, gathering, community, and togetherness. It suggests a party-like atmosphere with friends, family, and neighbors at an outdoor event filled with music, food, and entertainment. The Summer Event Planning Committee is also recommending that a different theme be recognized each year. If council permits, each year's theme will be chosen by the committee with the following in mind. The theme will be reflective of what Coaldale and surrounding community is experiencing at the time, and the theme will, wherever possible, celebrate and salute groups, ideas, landmarks, actions, and programs unique to Coaldale and area. The recommended 2022 Coaldale Summer Fest theme is Thank You Frontline Workers. Stakeholder engagement. An engagement survey was presented to the community between March 1st, 2022 and March 27th, 2022. Feedback was received with feedback from participants, suggestions of community values, what Coaldale means to you, their existing favorite community events, and name suggestions for the new summer event. The summer event committee is comprised of community members, town administration, and some members of council. Decision options. Option 1, that council approve the new summer event name as Coaldale Summerfest and that the 2022 theme be Thank You Frontline Workers. Option number 2, that council provide alternate direction to administration and the committee. Recommendation that council approve option 1, that council approve the new summer event name as Coaldale Summerfest and that the 2022 theme be Thank You Frontline Workers. The name Coaldale Summerfest evokes an energetic and exciting feel to the event and allows for the smooth alignment of any theme, which will be different from year to year and which will be truly representative of Coaldale and pertinent to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. Any questions for Clayton or Tammy or Cindy? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to Clayton. I guess my question is, you have written here that each year's theme will be chosen by the committee. And I was just wondering, at what point will council be included on what the theme is for the year? Because like, we've kind of discussed a few options already. And I mean, this one's great, I love it. But just for years coming, and I just wanted to know, like, when do we work together on that? Like, where's the communication type thing?
That very valid question.
Just, you have to use the microphone in case.
Sorry. Thank you for the question. Yes, we would want to, it's up to council how that theme is identified, but we would love if council had input into it. So what I would suggest then is that we usually start our planning like early January each year. So I would suggest that we come to council sometime in January just to bring up the topic, and then we could discuss it at that point and get feedback from all of you. That would be wonderful.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Any, Councillor Beekman?
And actually, Councillor Reese took my question there. So I guess all I really wanted to say was I love it. I love the I love the simplicity. I love the energy, and I love the changing theme. So great job by the committee.
Thank you.
With that being said, Councillor Beekman, would you care to sponsor the motion?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll sponsor a motion for that council approve option number 1.
Okay, and option number 1 is that council approve the new summer event name as Coaldale Summerfest and that the 2022 theme be Thank You Frontline Workers. Any further questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Clayton, congratulations on you and Joel's award for Community Artist of the Year as well.
Thank you.
Well deserved.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council, and thank you, volunteer community members, for being a part of all of this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to jump back to departmental reports, 9.1, infrastructure, and we have our municipal engineer, Dustin Yankee, presenting this evening. Dustin, when you get settled in, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'll be providing an update to Council on all the projects that the Infrastructure and Engineering Department has been working on. Some of them are past the construction phase, but I'll be touching base on all of them just to provide some information and opportunity if Council has any questions. Go next slide, Lina. So first project, Main Street revitalization. So this project was initiated because we needed to do upgrades to our deep utility infrastructure. Also presented the opportunity to modernize the streetscape of downtown. This project was completed summer of 2020, and this fall we will be doing our final warranty walkthrough. So you might see some crews out there late summer doing some minor concrete repairs from cracked panels, and that's all just part of the warranty. Total budget for that was $3.4 million. Fire hall. This one, you guys are obviously familiar with as well. Completed in 2021 officially. It involved the addition and renovation of the existing fire hall to service the town of Coldell and the county of Lethbridge for the next 50 to 75 years. The project cost for this was $4.5 million. 16th Avenue and 26th Street corridor upgrades. So this involved extending the roadway as well as the utilities, shallow utilities, and to feed services for future development in the area, as well as the new high school and rec center. This project was completed in fall of 2021, and there's a 2-year warranty period, so we'll be doing our warranty walkthrough at the end of 2023. And the total project cost for that, including all the Fortis and shallow utility upgrades, was $3 million. 2020, we constructed 3.4 kilometers of asphalt pathways in town. The goal of this was to improve active modes connectivity across all of South Coldell. Like I said, we completed it in summer of 2020, and we'll be doing a walkthrough this summer for final completion. Total project cost for this was $830,000. Highway 3 and 30th Street. This involved the installation of traffic signals. The goal with this was to accommodate growth for traffic throughout West Coldell. We had a number of complaints which were fielded through Volker Steven, Alberta Transportation, but we had some issues with faulty underground cable that's been resolved. So far they've been operating the way that they're supposed to. That project was completed last summer, has a 1-year warranty period, so we'll be doing a warranty walkthrough this summer, and the total project cost for that was $750,000. Bike park. This project was an exciting one for sure. It was a progressive mountain bike skills park next to the newly redeveloped Owl's Nest campground. It was completed in the fall of 2021. Also a 1-year warranty, so we'll be doing a walkthrough this year for that. Our parks department has some scheduled maintenance this summer, so we've reached out to a local guy that's experienced with bike parks, and he's going to assist us in training our staff to what to look for in the park to make it more desirable for people to ride. We had multiple donations, and including $50,000 from Cola Kinsman. The town's contribution was $250,000, which was paid for by our share of the proceeds from the sale of the land for the campground. Wastewater treatment upgrades. This involved the expansion of the town's wastewater treatment system to achieve compliance with regulatory requirements and to increase the system's capacity for future growth. The total project budget is $12.5 million. I should note that 37% of this was funded through the Alberta Municipal Water and Wastewater Program, so our contribution was about $8 million. To date, we've spent about $8 million of the total project budget. And we're still expecting completion on time for September of 2022. Civic Square, this is a multi-use commercial office development. It's being constructed in collaboration with a third-party private developer named Shift Real Estate Investments. This will be the location of the town's new administration office and council chambers, in addition to community meeting rooms, a large gathering space, commercial office space for prospective business. The total project budget for this is $6.4 million, and we're anticipating completion in late August, early September of 2022. Related to that, we have the outdoor space to the south. So this was originally proposed as phase 3 of the Civic Square project, which includes the development of this outdoor space for new additional parking, as well as a central gathering space for Coldell's downtown. As of right now, there isn't an allocated budget, but we have recently received great news on the Canada Community Revitalization Grant, which we've received $750,000 from the federal government. Additionally, part of the development agreement with Shift Real Estate was that they donated $75,000 to go towards this space. And also, we've recently applied for a grant for some EV charging stations. So it'll be a prospective parking lot with EV charging and an outdoor gathering plaza space for the community. The schedule for this, we're currently working with Fortis to bury the overhead power. So that'll be something that you'll see happening this summer. We're looking at doing community engagement and detailed design through 2022 with construction in 2023. Some additional pathways being constructed this year. It'll connect from the end of the pathways that were built in 2020, so right on 8th Street on the south side, just south of the Coldell Christian School. It'll connect to the new mountain bike park and the campground, and then furthermore, it'll connect from Parkside Boulevard to the campground as well. So there'll be a continuous loop of asphalt pathway, basically from Cottonwood all the way down the canal to the campground, and then through the bike park to Parkside, and then they can go back down 20th Avenue through town. The budget for this last extension is $175,000, and we're currently working on the request for quotation package in-house, and that'll be posted this spring for 2022 summer construction. Malloy Phase 2B. So this is a stormwater management facility to capture off-site flows entering from rural areas south of Coldell. What's proposed is a wet pond to be constructed south of Cottonwood, in which a bioswale will carry the water from there to our abandoned raw water reservoirs at the quads. The goal with this is basically to protect Coldell from water entering the town and to utilize the infrastructure we have with the abandoned raw water reservoirs to greatly increase the storage capacity for stormwater in town. So we have 2 approved grants for a total of $2.2 million that we've received. The project budget for right now is $3.1 million, and that minus the $2.2 million leaves $900,000, which is funded, shared by the town, Lethbridge County, and SMRID. Anticipated schedule for this is we will be looking at putting out a request for proposal for consulting services to complete the detailed design early this spring, with design to carry forward to proceed to construction in 2023. Not sure what happened with the picture there, but you can see south of Cottonwood there, there'll be a storm pond we'll be looking at containing about 100,000 cubes of water, and then it'll carry east and then north to the quads where we have our raw water reservoirs. This project will be a 2023 budget deliberation item. We recently had MPE Engineering complete a pre-design report. It was identified in our regularly scheduled maintenance of our potable water reservoirs that the fill line was deteriorating and was at the end of its useful life. So we had MPE look at the logistics and what technical and budgetary requirements would be required to replace this line because it's such a critical asset for the town. For construction, including detailed design to complete this project, it'll be about $112,000. So this will, like I said, this will come up later this year as a budget deliberation item, and then we'd be hoping to do construction summer or fall of 2023. And there will just be some coordination with our operations department in terms of maintaining an adequate schedule that isn't going to hinder the supply of water for the town. This West Coldell Transportation Connectivity Study. So this was a request for proposal that we recently posted. It's a technical planning study that'll analyze various options for improving active modes connectivity in West Coldell, while also accommodating the necessary roadway upgrades for future development. So on the November 9th meeting, council had approved a $50,000 budget. The project was awarded just a couple of weeks ago to MPE Engineering, who's the lowest bid at $40,545. and we're looking at completing this study in summer of 2022. I should mention too that a big part of completing this study is that it'll provide us costs for all the road and infrastructure upgrades for future development, in which we can apply to future analysis for our offsite levy rates. Highway 3 845 intersection. I know this has been a hot topic for many councils. So I coincidentally got a phone call from Alberta Transportation a little bit ago, and they are undertaking a study to determine what upgrades could be undertaken at this intersection. They have an overlay project scheduled. It was originally going to be for late 2021, but because of us questioning them and asking for numerous upgrades to be done and the studies that have been completed in the past, they're deciding to be a little bit more comprehensive and try to figure out if there's any feasible upgrades that can be accommodated at the same time, as well as planning long-term what this intersection needs to look like. So town staff will be working alongside their project team and their consultants to communicate our needs of the community, any necessary stakeholder engagement that may be required based on various options, and just to relay some of the concerns that we've had from feedback. And this study we'd be looking at hopefully completing by summer of 2022, in which we would bring the results to council shortly after. So they're taking basically just a bird's eye view of it and trying to figure out what they can do. So no promises made at the time on any improvements that they're going to make, but at the very least we're hopefully getting another set of eyes to look at some of the issues and one step closer to finding the best solution. This is the last slide I have, just touching base on some of the other key interdepartmental projects that we work on. So traffic calming, we work closely with community policing and the planning and development department. We're currently collecting speed data across the town to do a speed study. Our traffic analyzers are set up at various locations, which we've determined to try to determine what the average speed of motorists is within the town's road network. So this ties back to discussion with council on potentially lowering the residential speed limit from 50 to 40. So by looking at the speed data, we'll be able to determine what implications there would be of lowering the speed limit based on the speed that motorists are traveling right now. We're looking at having data collection completed in the next, hopefully by June is what we're aiming for, and we could bring the data to council with possible next steps and recommendation. Yeah, I think that's it for traffic calming, but the other item that we work on every other week is our asset management program. So we kind of kicked off formally last year, where we have bi-weekly team meetings with infrastructure and engineering, finance department, operations, recreation, emergency services, and brainstorm ideas on how to formalize our asset management program and just give all the different perspectives. So we meet regularly, and our, I guess, perspective from the engineering side helps kind of shape the technical side of things. So that's an overview. I guess I'll open up the floor if there's any questions. I can go back to any slides, if anything in particular.
Thank you, Dustin. I'll open up the floor for any questions for Dustin. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. My only question, just for clarification, did you say that the study will be completed by the summer for Highway 3 and the 845? Is that what you said?
That's correct.
Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and thank you, Dustin, for this excellent presentation. Two questions for you. One, and basically there's just more feedback from the public already who are speaking fairly loudly with me on regards to a few things here. Number one being that same intersection of Highway 845 and Highway 3. their points being that maybe what we should be looking at is more of kind of like a similarity to the intersection of Highway 3 and 43rd Street. So each bit of traffic that's entering the intersection also from all four directions would have an advanced left-hand turn. So maybe Alberta Transportation might want to consider that in their study as to whether that might be feasible for traffic efficiency. So my second one is with regards to traffic calming, and already people are saying that the speed limits around Coaldale are fair and adequate. I know that maybe for the main areas that they're definitely might be worthy of a study, but for the most part, most people feel that the reality is that for traffic calming is that you need actual presence of our police officers or CPOs, and that's really the difference for slowing traffic down and calming. But the third thing that has come up, and maybe I can bring it up with Mark Anderson later on too, is 20th Street. I know it's come up already, and it'll probably be in your presentation, but with regards to 20th Street and the rationale for slowing the John Davidson section down, people are really happy that the semis and are moved away from there, and that there's no parking on that side of the road by John Davidson, but just lots of questions about why we're still doing that then, of having that slowed down to 30 kilometers an hour.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I appreciate the insight on the intersection. I'll defer your question on the playground zone to Mark Anderson. He'll be the guy to answer that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Reese, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Well, I don't know if this ties into the traffic calming thing that you're working on right now, but what about the intersection at Tim Hortons and the gas station and McDonald's there? That little thing we got going on there is a mad mess. Is there anything, any sort of survey for that little intersection there?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reese. So that intersection, it was brought up last council term, and we had a conceptual design completed by ISL Engineering to install a roundabout. They also looked at putting in traffic signals. Both options are costed out. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but they, at that time, council had deferred it. So basically the upgrades from an engineering perspective and a level service perspective weren't warranted. There are considerations as well for the context of the intersection that might advance that sooner, given that it's not aligned properly in the spacing. So personally, I wouldn't say it's not justified, but that, I believe, at the time was why it was pushed off, because when you look at the recommendations from a level of service capacity perspective, it was passing. So if that's something that council wanted to bring up again, we could certainly look into it, but yeah, from an engineering perspective, it was satisfactory.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead.
So then how come the calming circle, if you don't mind my asking, why was that ex-nade? They didn't want to do the traffic circle there at that intersection?
Yeah, I believe at the time it was more of a budget consideration
for
council. Yeah.
So it's still on the to-do list, but it was deferred.
That, I should add too, that intersection will be analyzed with a TIA study that'll be completed this summer. So it's getting looked at again as more development occurs in the area. We look at those key intersections to see how they're being impacted. So it's not like it's being forgotten about, but.
So you guys are going to look into that in the summer again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I just ask a follow-up question to Councillor Reese? With regards to that particular intersection, I believe I talked last fall about when Spencer was still employed with us, that maybe what we should be doing in the meantime until the analysis all comes back and all that we realign that intersection with better lines, so that they're much more distinct and clear as to straight through, turn right, turn left, and I think that's really what's causing a lot of confusion there. And because those lines don't line up with the opposite side, it does confuse people from both sides, coming from Home Hardware or from Tim Hortons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nope, that's a good point.
Okay, Kaylin's got a question or comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add one point in response to Councillor Reese's question. The approximate cost for the traffic circle at the intersection was around $700,000, and there wasn't a funding source that was available without draining our road reserve that would be earmarked for, say, a deep utility project or something like that. However, with the West Coaldale development, there will be the revenue from the off-site levies from that could potentially be used if council wanted to reassess that as a revenue stream for that type of infrastructure. And as Dustin mentioned, that intersection will be looked at again as part of further analysis of Highway 3 and the connectivity study that we're just starting.
Any Councillor Pickering?
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. This is through to Dustin. The only question I have is on that Civic Square. You have a budget set for it, like the sewage lagoons. You've got a budget and what you spent to date. Do you have a total for us on up to date on what Civic Square is setting at?
Thank you, Councillor Pickering. For Civic Square, so the way the contract was written, we get billed based on progress, and we actually haven't seen a progress bill for 2022. So what I have to report wouldn't be an accurate representation. So unfortunately, I don't have a to-date number, but as of right now, we're still projecting it to be on budget. I don't know if Kaylin, if you want to add anything to that, but.
Further to Dustin's comments, it's structured in a draw type system. So once they meet certain milestones, I think it's over four different draws over the course of the project. Based on the current change orders and contemplated change orders, we're still on target to be within the contractual budget, and the prices that we have were locked in at the time of signing. So the exact amount percentage-wise, we'll have to get back to you likely next meeting once they meet their next draw schedule.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, any overages have to come back to council for approval anyway, so. Okay, and then I have a couple of questions, Dustin. One has to do with the existing pathways. Has the warranty period expired on the ones by the canal where we have those large fissures running along them?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the issues that we've experienced on the 2022 pathways aren't a result of the contractor's errors. We have had a geotechnical study completed on some of the soil, so we did some drilling in the area. What the takeaway was that there is a lot of high plastic clay, so where the canal pipe or the canal turns to pipeline, there was material used at the time that I guess isn't typical for the area. It's pretty common to construct a pathway in this manner. Like, we did reach out to the city and ask them how they would have proceeded a project like this, and typically it's cheaper to fix a pathway than it is to over-design it per se. So it's unfortunate. The contractor has worked with us and repaired some of it and will repair some more. But in terms of a lot of the larger cracking, it's something that we're going to have to probably do one larger repair on, hopefully, and then hopefully the movement is stopped by then. But yeah, the clay basically below it is moving and drying at a different pace than the clay on the other side.
And do you know if some of that repair work is scheduled for 2022 before those get larger, those cracks or fissures?
Yes, there is. And there is an operational item for crack repair in the operations budget.
Okay. And then also I had a question about the quads, the automated irrigation system for the so we don't use potable water for watering the grass. So is that still on the slate to get done this year, or is that based on the decommissioned reservoirs? Do we have to have water in there first, pumped over from the newest Malloy phase?
Yes, I believe what you're referring to is recommissioning the reservoirs in which we would use the water stored in there to irrigate the area. They do have a pump there now, but I believe that's something separate from what you're asking of. So the bigger project is getting the reservoirs recommissioned to use that water to irrigate the area, though.
So that $60,000 irrigation project, or Kyle's going to comment on this, sir.
Yeah, just because I sit close to us, I've kind of overheard on that. They have sent a RFP or quotates. They've got quotes back, and I believe they have selected a contractor, and they are in the process of starting it soon. So that should be something that council can expect to see happening very shortly.
Okay, Kaylin?
Just for clarity, that's the pumping and automation side of the irrigation at the quads. And what Dustin was referring to is the source of water that we use to water the quads. That would be tied to the Phase 2B of the Malloy. The problem right now is our sports season and starts in April. And as Councillor Pickering knows, the canal water does not start until May. And so lots can happen in a month if it's dry without precipitation. And we don't want to use the potable water from the city because it's expensive and not good for the environment. The benefits of having Phase 2B of the Malloy done, where there'll be a cell within the decommissioned reservoir, is that we will have the ability to use untreated water in the month of April for sports fields out of the quads, if that helps.
Yes, that helps. Okay. Any further questions for Dustin? Seeing none, could I get someone to sponsor a motion that council receives the infrastructure report as information? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. Good job. Okay, moving on to item 9.2, Protective Services, Quarter 1 report. We have our Manager of Policing, Mark Anderson, presenting. Welcome, Mark. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Councilors, for having me here this evening. I'm sorry our fire chief wasn't able to be here with me as well, so it's just me alone. This is an update for Coaldale District Municipal Enforcement for the first quarter 2022. Our calls for service this year, so far we're at 29 calls for service, and again, spread out fairly evenly across town. No one area draws more than any other. Midtown gathers the most calls for service again, but it's to be expected with the amount of daytime traffic and people that we have here in the downtown area. There have been our sort of staffing highlights for the first part of the year was that we lost our photo radar operator for about 6 weeks at the beginning of this year due to surgery that he had. We were supplementing him with our CPOs and myself to try and keep the photo radar program going at a regular basis, but we did lose a little bit of time on that in the first quarter. We also had one of our CPOs come down with COVID, and we lost him for about 2 weeks out of the first quarter as well. Again, our methods for reporting are pretty standard as they were at the year end. Phone being the number one, other than blank. Blank just means our guys got the calls that could have come from anywhere. We'll be working on having them address that so we can more properly identify where our calls for service are coming in from. But phone and officer observed are the most prevalent for us right now. So the guys are out in the community, they're making observations on their own, or calls are coming to them while they're driving around. And they're doing well now. They're picking up and getting out and more into the community now that their training's finished. In the first quarter, our largest activity type was actually snow-related, so we're responding to snow complaints, which is to be expected. Our second one was traffic control, now that the fellows are responding to different traffic events with the fire department, providing service there and enhanced service for emergency services. We have had a number of dogs running at large this year, which was unexpected for us. We used to have service, as you know, from Lethbridge Animal Services, and now we are responding to those complaints as well. We are actively working with a committee to address the issue as we're moving forward into the second quarter, and progress is being made in that regard. In March of this year, we began a new enforcement program of warnings in all of our new playground zones. After the rebranding of all of the playground zones in the town, we had our CPOs as well as our photo radar unit working in the playground zones throughout Coaldale, and everything was done as strictly a warning as opposed to an offense. We did not have any seriously egregious speeding offenses at that time, so we were able to respond strictly with warnings. We had very good feedback from the people that we've spoken to regarding the changing in signs. So we've had 4 or 5 calls now where people really appreciate having the new signs that lay out all of the rules and that they're consistent throughout the town. We are now going back to standard enforcement in those areas. So we'll be using photo radar and traditional enforcement in all of our playground zones. We gave out a number of warnings. There was about 9 official written warnings given out to people where their speeds were getting up there, but not enough that we felt we needed to charge them. And there were a number of other public engagements where we just stopping people at lower speeds, still speeding, and talking to them and speaking with them as well. Traditional enforcement would have been outside of the playground zones, so that would have been on our other streets in town, and also related to dog offenses and other enforcement activities undertaken by our CPO1s. And we had 32 tickets roughly issued during the first quarter for a number of various offenses. Again, still just shy of 25 warnings given out as well, and a few verbal warnings that were recorded in a report. The big number for us, of course, is always automated enforcement, and in 2022 versus 2021, we visited the same number of sites in the first quarter, being 11. Fewer tickets were issued, and I anticipated that just because of our lost service time with our primary operator being off. Average offense costs were relatively the same. That will always change from year to year depending on the average speed of the vehicles that are captured speeding. And again, revenues this year slightly down at $211,000, which would be the gross value of the tickets issued during quarter one through automated traffic enforcement. We did have a few surprises during quarter one, which we weren't anticipating. I know that I've spoken to council before on a number of occasions regarding a program brought in by the provincial government called Safe Roads, in which all of the provincial traffic offenses were going to be removed from the provincial court system and forwarded through or reprocessed through Alberta Transportation through a program called Safe Roads, which offered us some exceptional improvements on delivery of service. Everybody who was involved in the process thought it was a great idea. The one fall down that we had pointed out at the beginning was that there had been no public consultation done anywhere along the way until about a week before the launch, and it was brought to the public's attention that under Safe Roads you would have to pay a fee in order to fight a traffic ticket if you felt it was inappropriate or it had been done without proper consideration. There was a large backlash from the community at large, and I think a lot of us involved could see that one coming right from the outset. And the MLAs within the province received enough feedback from the public that they announced a delay until June 1st of the launch of Safe Roads. but assured us that we had to keep moving forward and that we had to be ready to go, that this was not going to be canceled. And on March the 23rd, the provincial government announced that Safe Roads had been canceled and everything we had done up until that point had been for naught. And there is at this point no planned relaunch date to initiate Safe Roads again. Excuse me, that left my office with a really large challenge because our current system of processing offenses was no longer going to be around. The company that we had been working with before has discontinued support of the product. So have been and still are running on our pins and needles, trying to keep everything running and processing our offenses until such time as the company that we had worked with on Safe Roads, a company called MRF Geosystems, can work with us to rebuild an offense processing system to go to the court system. This caused an unexpected expenditure for us, which is coming soon, of about $9,000. We had a meeting with MRF, and unfortunately, they couldn't just turn the switch on the Safe Roads programming that they had done, because Safe Roads uses a completely different system of electronic transmission than the Court of Alberta does, and so we had to redesign the entire software package again to get us up and running. And our launch date now we're anticipating will be between May 1st and May the 15th, if all goes well. That launch date is contingent actually upon the court system called Join and successful testing with them. The actual software itself is in development. I've worked myself with the in development stages, and it's actually going to incorporate a lot of the enhancements that we had worked into the Safe Road system, which will improve our efficiencies within the unit and some of our operating costs like paper and those other things that we were spending a lot of money on. So we're taking the best of what we had in that system and incorporating it into the court system that we have to go back to so that we can maintain those improvements. The second big surprise that we had was when I was rather embarrassed to find out the day after I presented that our annual report to council that Lethbridge Animal Services, with whom we'd had such a great working relationship over the last, the length of time that I've been here. And I reported to council how happy I was with them and how we wanted to continue that. It was actually the day following that I received a phone call from the manager of BYLAWS for the city of Lethbridge, announcing that their contract supplier no longer had the contract to operate Lethbridge Animal Services, which was over several contract issues which really have nothing to do with the town. But the upshot, or the result for us, was that Lethbridge Animal no longer wanted to continue the contract that we had for outsourcing dog pound services and patrol services as well. We launched into discussions with a number of people immediately thereafter, and we do have an interim plan in place with Ridge Regional Services where we are allowed to use their dog pound as long as we provide the people to watch our dogs on weekends. Other than that, they're helping us out for a very small fee to house dogs through the weeks if we have them. And we now have formed an ad hoc committee with some members of council and Mayor Van Rijn as well. We have now been joined by several community members as well to examine and be prepared to come back before council at a future meeting with both a short and a long-term plan for a Maiden Coaldale idea for dog pound services. And we'll be happy and very pleased to come back later with more on that once our working committee has had an opportunity to review it, then formalize something to present to you. We have at this time no other unanticipated expenditures that I can see coming. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions from council? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Mark Anderson. First off, in regards to the photo radar, because with the photo radar operator being incapacitated for a little bit there. For my own knowledge, do you need a special certification to operate the photo radar, and are all of our CPOs or any of our CPOs able to handle that task?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the province requires that anybody who operates photo radar complete a 40-hour course in basic theory and operation of traffic enforcement radar, also specific to the unit they're operating, and also including education on the automated traffic enforcement guidelines. That course, following that course, we then would have to apply for Community Peace Officer Level 2 status for that person in order to operate the photo radar. All in, it takes about a month for somebody to go through, month to 6 weeks to complete that process. In answer to the second part of your question, everybody in our unit is trained as a photo radar operator. Luckily, I am actually the photo radar trainer appointed by the province for the type of equipment that we have. So everybody that comes through the door is trained. And I will be coming back at a later time as well with a proposal I've discussed with our CAO to have an on-call casual photo radar operator that we can call in when we have a need like that. We can bring them in for a day here or there, and we can also have their use of their services for special events when we need an extra manpower, but not be obligated to keep them on 20 or 30 hours a week all the time.
Thank you. And if I could ask one more question. In regards to the cancellation of safe roads, you had in your report that we have about 14 months and $60,000 of investment into it. With the province canceling it, has there been any offer of reimbursement, or is that money just gone?
Thank you for the question. We've discussed that. The group that I work with, the other partners would be our City of Lethbridge, Town of Tabor, City of Medicine Hat, and the City of Lloydminster. We've all worked together on the process that we've undergone here recently. We had a joint meeting where we discussed it, having a letter from Town Council to go to the province requesting some reimbursement for that. The idea is just in the formation process now. One of our chiefs of police from the Tabor Police Service was going to take the idea to the Chiefs Conference, which is coming up here very shortly, and discuss it with all the other chiefs of police throughout the province, and come back with some ideas that we would then formulate before coming to council. There has been no offer from the province, though, to make any restitution. It will be something that we would have to move forward with to them.
Thank you, Jason. Any further questions? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. And, I do have several, and thank you so much, Mark, for participating in the fun run on Saturday. It was good to have you out there and building the team up.
Thank you.
Councillor Beekman took part of my question on the photo radar, and so the shortfall that you have of 9,000 again, is that going to come out of the photo radar monies or does that come out of a separate budget that you'll need for that expenditure?
I would have to defer that question to our financial officer, if he wouldn't mind.
In looking at that 9,000 and in looking, Mark and I kind of discussed the discretion that we have on whether or not to spend it and the benefits and whatnot. So it is an unbudgeted item that, to be frank, is kind of necessary in this moment. So that was the first step that we talked about it. What we're going to do, what generally happens in the budget process is, we know that we're going to have small amounts. When I say small, in the realms of our operating budget, like $10,000 is fairly small. We know that we're going to have small overages, and we know we're going to have amounts under budget throughout the year. It just happens naturally. And so this is one of the items that we're keeping track on, and then we'll kind of, we know we'll have some small excess to kind of make it up at the end of it.
Thank you. And just a further operational question, if I may ask.
Absolutely.
I did get concerns again from several locations with regards to 20th Street and the entrance, or the exit, I guess, from the Coaldale Foods. and the Scotia Bank. So lots of people are going in the backwards and breaking the law. So I'm just would like to see if there'd be some monitoring observations along there. Seems like it's a fairly constant thing. It's nothing that we can do better because it's up to the operator to obey the law appropriately, but just a monitoring question. And further to that, another monitoring question with regards to my previous question about 20th Street and John Davidson, and if there's a possibility you might be able to observe how the traffic is being run or monitored along there. I know that it's reduced down to 30 kilometers an hour, but is that really an effective or efficient area to be reduced down to the speed? So most people are questioning me about that speed, and they feel that 50 kilometers an hour with the fence at John Davidson is still appropriate and a safe place. So that's something that you could look into and observe for the next while.
Thank you for the question. We do speed studies using our traffic analyzers at all of our photo radar locations to actually see what the speed limits are and at what times of the day they're that. So what times of the day would be most appropriate for us to be there for enforcement activity, or if it's appropriate for us to be there for enforcement activity. So that is an ongoing process for all of our sites. So yes, it will be reviewed on an ongoing basis. We all receive feedback from different sources. I have spoken to one particular individual who's not happy that the speed limit was reduced there. We have had good feedback though from the pedestrians that use the area, not just the school kids, but the other pedestrians that are crossing there on a regular basis, both for the speed reduction and for the no parking zone along there, because it's increased visibility and it's decreased the speed and it's increased the visibility, which makes it safer for pedestrians and pedestrian-friendly travel in the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one comment on Councillor Chapman's point about the people going in the wrong way by the Scotia Bank towards the Coldale Foods. Would a larger sign would be helpful, because they got the sign that says that you can't go in there is quite small, so that might be an easy way to mitigate that, is to put a larger sign up. One on either side or something as well, yes. And then the other question I have, and you brought that up when you were doing your presentation, is that comment where it says blank. So because you have that on pages 2, 3, and 4 of your presentation, and that's kind of misleading. I don't understand what that's about, but you alluded to it at the beginning. Can you just explain that one more time?
If the report writer doesn't indicate how the complaint came in, it just shows up as blank. That's a training issue that's going to come up on our next staff meeting this month, to make sure that the guys are putting that in every time, just to include it in the report.
Thank you. I think that's important that you do that. Yep. And then also I wanted to bring up what I spoke with you at another meeting and that was to do with doing cold calls on for business licenses on construction sites. So I see that, and again, I'll use the one that's going up on 19th, where there's that threeplex going up. There is numerous contractors working at that location that I'm very confident when I look on the town's website that they do not have business licenses for Coldale. And that's not just that project. There's many projects in Coldale. And when I was in business, if you went to Tabor and you didn't have your business license, like, I don't know how they can find you, but within a couple hours, they're there with warning you with a ticket if you don't have a business license. So
I know that, thank you for the question, Mayor, and yes, we will be doing more cold calls on the sites, especially now that our business season, our building season is in full swing. We have been working on going through all of our business licenses that haven't been renewed in cooperation with our utilities and taxation people here, and reviewing with all of those businesses who say they work here but haven't renewed their licenses. So that's been our focus so far, and we're about a third of the way through all of those businesses. But I will certainly ask our CPOs and myself to go out and do more cold calls on those businesses working in town.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And then also you mentioned that the reciprocal business license program that we had, that's no longer in effect.
The reciprocal business license agreement that we had with some surrounding towns here expired about 3 years ago. And when it was brought before council previously, council moved and agreed that we would not be reaching out to start that reciprocal agreement again.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Say, Mark, my question to you is, have you heard any more about if they're going to be on the playground zones, marking them more legible on the roads? Due to 845 being traveled as much as it is, that first sign isn't very much advance warning of the slowdown. And I noticed big trucks hauling up and down there, and even traffic. It seems like they come roaring up there, and then it's like the brakes go on instantly.
I apologize. Thank you for the question. I would have to I can pass this along to our operations manager, and I can ask him to follow up, and I can get back to you with an answer to that question.
Okay, if there's no further questions, could I get someone to make a motion that council receive the Protective Services Report as information? Councillor Pickering, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Once again, Mark, good job. Appreciate your report.
Thank you.
Moving on to information items. We have item 12.1, Municipal Affairs, our ACP grant. And not to put you on the spot, Kaylin, could you just, or if Kyle wants to do it, talk about that grant?
So the ACP grant, so this grant is for the Town of Coledale Fire Department or Emergency Services Master Plan. So when Town Council approved the Emergency Services Master Plan back in November, had a total budget of $50,000. We didn't budget for this grant because there was some uncertainty of whether or not we would be receiving it. So the $42,000 and change that we received is strictly an added benefit that will fund the majority of the project. So that the $50,000 that was supposed to be funded through reserves will be largely funded through this ACP grant.
Thank you. And then item 12.2, the Alberta Public Works Association National Parks Works Week, May 12th to May 21st, 2022. So that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kaylin, that's the union for our public works that puts this on, or who puts this? The Alberta chapter of the APWA.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The APWA, there we go. That isn't the union for our staff. That is an advocacy organization that represents public works employees, advocates for their needs, awareness of what they do across the entire province. It's not specific to any one membership group, if that was your question.
Okay. So the question is, with this letter, is if we want to proclaim the, from May 15th to May 21st, the Ready and Resilient National Public Works Week. Is there any interest by council to move forward with this? And Kaylin, if I could ask you one more time, this would help us recognize our Public Works Department?
That's right. Yeah, we would be a part of this broader advocacy network that the APWA stands for. It wouldn't be a whole lot of work for us to do this. There is the precedent that council would be setting. In the past, there was some concern about saying yes to this, and what does that commit you to long term? There's a lot of letters like this that we receive to declare dates or weeks for different causes. I don't see any risk other than is council comfortable with from a precedent perspective. From a workload perspective, this wouldn't be a whole lot. As a potential alternative, if council didn't want to declare the week, we could look at doing messaging as we've done in the past, just promoting our public works employees and doing our own posting and awareness for what they do during this week. That would be a potential option, or you could do that and declare it. That would be up to council.
And the reason this one piqued my interest is that the city of Lethbridge, before COVID, I took my grandkids to it by the ATB Center on the west side. The city had every type of equipment that they use, like graders and hydrovacs and backhoes, and they had fire trucks, police cars. And there was a full day event where they let kids crawl all over that equipment. And then they had operators for each piece of equipment stand there and talk to the residents about that equipment. So this particular one is coming up fairly quick, but I like your idea of the messaging. So I'll look into this a little further, and then I'll get back to council with a couple of suggestions. So with that being said, is there any questions on that? Councillor Saylor?
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I just had a question. If it's coming up pretty quick, we could always maybe do like employee appreciation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up on Councillor Saylor, I agree with that idea. And of course, we do have that Wednesday morning in May as well, our next breakfast as well, you know, that we can utilize that day, that time to celebrate and salute our employees. So I would suggest that we receive this for information.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm just going to back up then. 12.1, I need someone to make a motion to receive the municipal affairs correspondence as information. Councillor Beekman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then Councillor Chapman made a motion that we receive the APWA correspondence for information. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We're going to be moving into closed meeting, so I'm going to require a motion that council move to go into closed session at 7:36 p.m. in accordance with Section 197-2 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for item 13.1, subject to FOIP Section 16, third-party business interest, item 13.2, subject to FOIP Section 16, third-party business interests, and 17, third-party personal privacy. And Councillor Pickering is making that motion. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break.